Number 10. Bermuda Triangle disappearances sure go back a long ways. The best example of this is the disappearance of Thomas J. Lynch Jr. and his wife while they were sailing to the West Indies in 1779, 3 years after the United States of America officially became independent. Lynch was a representative of South Carolina and one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. This incident was apparently the first reported disappearance in what was to become known as the territory called the Bermuda Triangle. Number 9. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops in the Bermuda Triangle is thought to be the biggest loss of Navy personnel not related to combat in American military history. It was carrying 309 people and some very heavy cargo. Around March 4, 1918, the vessel, a huge ship that carried fuel to the American fleet during the First World War, stopped off in Barbados to load up with even more cargo before setting off again on its journey back to the States and the port of Baltimore. It never arrived, and a huge recovery mission was deployed in hopes of finding it. It vanished without a trace. Its entire route was retraced and not a single piece of debris was ever found. Since it was believed that German submarines might have gotten to it, and since there was so much cargo that could have floated all over, the fact that nothing was ever found is even more bizarre. Also, what is extremely eerie is the fact that some 23 years later, during the Second World War in 1941, 2 of the Cyclops sister ships also disappeared along the same route. Number 8. Flight 19 is the name that was given to the mission that consisted of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers that disappeared during a training flight in the Bermuda Triangle on December 15, 1945. All 14 men aboard the 5 planes disappeared without a trace. Flight 19 became one of the most famous Bermuda Triangle incidents when filmmaker Steven Spielberg used it as fodder for his sci-fi horror flick Close Encounter of the Third Kind, in which the mysterious disappearance is explained decades later by an alien abduction. In the movie, the pilots are taken to Mars, but later returned to Earth peacefully by their alien captors. Of course, this piece of fiction, as interesting as it may sound, had no proof to it. But what is true is the fact that during the search for the 5 planes, a Martin Mariner flying boat with 13 men on board disappeared over the water too. Number 7. 2 years after the Flight 19 incident on July 3, 1947, a C-54 aircraft took off from Bermuda and apparently flew straight into a thunderstorm, which is odd because the investigation board in Florida, who was called upon to explain the mystery, said the aircraft should have avoided the storm. The tempest would explain why the plane totally disintegrated with no trace, but still, it seems the plane headed way off course right from the beginning of the flight and changed courses twice, going straight into the eye of the storm. With an experienced pilot on board, this is considered extremely conspicuous. Also bizarre is the fact that only 6 people were on board the plane that could usually seat 85 passengers. The ground radio operator is said to have heard a faint SOS that he ignored because he felt it couldn't be a real distress call. The second SOS was apparently clearer, and then there was silence. The plane was never seen or heard from again. Number 6. This U.S. military aircraft was one of the most successful models of its time. The day it disappeared, it was carrying 42 passengers, a group of Navy officers and members of the families who were traveling overseas. It was only about 400 miles from the coast when it simply vanished with no explanation. The pilot hadn't even sent an SOS call. Of course, a thorough investigation was conducted and all possible theories were examined. Could it have been the plane, the weather, the pilot's capabilities? Adding to the mystery is the fact that the plane's cargo contained many life rafts that would have floated on the water if the plane had broken apart on landing. Therefore, they would have been easily traceable. Nothing was ever found. Number 5. A pair of Piper PA jets disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle within 2 years of each other. The first, with 3 people on board, vanished on June 20th, 2005 between the Bahamas' Treasure Cay Island and Fort Pierce in Florida. In a similar incident, the second plane disappeared on April 10th, 2007 near Berry Island. In that case, the pilot was alone on board without any passengers. Number 4. Both these planes, the Star Tiger and Star Ariel, owned by the British airliner, disappeared within a year of each other in very similar circumstances. The Star Tiger left Santa Maria in the Azores on January 30th, 1948, with 29 people on board en route to Bermuda. The Star Ariel took flight on January 17th, 1949, with 20 people on board. Both planes never signaled any distress, and both planes seem to have vanished into thin air. In the case of the Star Tiger, the radio operator was in contact with the plane and was expecting the aircraft to land in Bermuda at 5 a.m. When it didn't show up on time, a state of emergency was declared, and a fleet of 26 airplanes searched for 5 days without ever finding a thing. In 1998, wreckage of another aircraft owned by the same company was found in the Andes. That plane had vanished the year before the Star Tiger disappearance, but nothing has ever been found of the other 2 Star planes. That airline certainly seemed to have had a strange track record, that's for sure. Number 3. Owned by a rich businessman who ran a popular hotel on the Atlantic coast in Miami, Florida, Witchcraft was a 23-foot luxury cabin cruiser. One December night, the owner of the boat invited his father onto the cruiser to see Christmas lights along the shore. They didn't even go a mile offshore. At 9 p.m., the Coast Guard got a call from the owner saying that he thought his boat had hit something, that it wasn't an emergency, but that he required towing. He also said he'd send up a flare to indicate his position. The Coast Guard got to the location less than 20 minutes later, but the ship was MIA and no flare was ever spotted. A 1,200 square mile search was conducted, but nothing was ever found. The 2 men in the boat just seemed to have vanished. In this case, wouldn't you have suspected foul play? I'm not sure the owner of the boat was on the up and up. Number 2. The Marine Sulphur Queen was a T-2 tanker that carried sulfur, as its name indicated. When it disappeared, it was going from Beaumont, Texas to Norfolk, Virginia. On February 4, 1963, the tanker apparently sent a completely normal radio message but was reported missing by February 6th. 39 crew members were lost. Again, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen had followed in the footsteps of its sister ship, the SS Sylvia El Osa, that had gone down east of Bermuda in 1976. In the case of that ship, some debris and an empty lifeboat were found at least. Number 1. Topping up our list is the most recent of the Bermuda Triangle disappearances. The Trislander, a British Norman Islander plane, took off from Santiago bound for New York on December 15, 2008 with 12 people on board. Only 35 minutes after takeoff, the plane ascended and disappeared from radar. A massive search and rescue mission was launched by the United States Coast Guard, but the plane was never seen again, nor was anything of it ever found. According to records, the plane went missing around the West Caicos Island. What is strange is that every year prior to this latest disappearance, many unexplained incidents would occur every year. But since the Trislander's disappearance, the Bermuda Triangle seems to have stopped swallowing ships and planes. Since a few airliners seem to have disappeared in Asia these past few years, maybe the Bermuda Triangle has moved to a new location.